Emily stood motionless, her soul adrift in a gray, ethereal haze, suspended above the world she once knew. Below her, the river's dark waters churned the very place where her life had ended just hours ago. At 45, she was a ghost, her heart heavy with the weight of 20 years of sacrifice, years spent caring for her bedridden mother-in-law, scrubbing floors, spoon-feeding porridge, and changing soiled linens, all while her husband Kevin betrayed her with another woman. The sting of that betrayal burned deeper than the cold water that had claimed her life. In her past life, Emily had been the dutiful wife married at 25 to Kevin, a charming delivery man with dreams bigger than his means. She had loved him fiercely enough to defy her wealthy parents who owned the city's largest shopping mall. They warned her that Kevin's easy smile hid a shallow heart, but young and stubborn Emily cut ties with them, claiming she was an orphan to silence their objections. For Kevin, she gave up her identity, her dreams of studying art and the comfort of her family's wealth, believing love would be enough. Emily poured her soul into their small, cluttered home for 2 decades. Her mother-in-law, a sharp-tongued woman with a penchant for control, had suffered a stroke early in their marriage, leaving her paralyzed. Eager to maintain his image as a dutiful son, Kevin leaned on Emily to care for her. Day and night she tended to the older woman's needs, bathing her, feeding her, enduring her insults, all while Kevin distanced himself, claiming work kept him away. Emily, naive and devoted, saw it as her duty. She believed her sacrifices would build a future where she and Kevin could finally live happily once her mother-in-law passed. But that future never came. The moment her mother-in-law died at 80, Kevin's true face emerged. He stormed into their home, his eyes cold, and ordered Emily out. Before she could process the shock, a woman stepped through the door, Linda, flamboyant and smug, her arm linked with Kevin's. Linda declared, "This is my home now," her voice dripping with triumph. Emily's world shattered. She refused to leave, quietly demanding answers, but Kevin and Linda responded mercilessly. They struggled by the river behind their house and pushed her into the icy water. Emily, who never learned to swim, thrashed helplessly as the current pulled her under. As her lungs filled, she heard Kevin's voice, calm and cruel. She slipped. It was an accident. Now, as her soul hovered above, Emily saw the truth unfold. Kevin and Linda returned to the house laughing, their arms around a young man, a 23-year-old son. The math was a knife to her heart. Their affair had begun in the second year of her marriage, while she was scrubbing floors and wiping spittle from her mother-in-law's chin. Emily had been a fool. For 20 years, her youth was wasted on a man who mocked her devotion. Worse, she learned Kevin had extorted money from neighbors, claiming compensation for her accidental death, while he and Linda lived happily as if Emily had never existed. The betrayal seared her soul, a fire that refused to fade. Her resentment grew so fierce that the heavens themselves seemed to tremble. An ancient and resonant voice echoed in the void. "Your heart's fury denies you rest. Will you return to rewrite your fate?" Emily's spirit, blazing with rage, answered without hesitation. She would not fade into oblivion. She would live again, not to forgive, but to ensure every tear she shed was repaid. The world below blurred, and darkness enveloped her, promising a second chance to change her story. Emily's soul drifted in a void, neither heaven nor earth, where shadows swirled like ink in water. The river's cold grip on her body was a fading memory, but the fire of her betrayal burned brighter than ever. 20 years of sacrifice, wiping her mother-in-law's brow, enduring Kevin's lies, and surrendering her dreams for a man who drowned her, fueled a rage that refused to be silenced. Her heart, heavy with resentment, pulsed with a single vow: those who had ruined her would pay. As her spirit hovered in this liminal space, a presence stirred, ancient and vast, its voice resonating like a bell in a storm. "Daughter of sorrow," it intoned, "your fury binds you to this world. The underworld rejects a soul so unyielding. Will you return to right the wrongs done to you?" Emily's spirit trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. She saw flashes of her past life, her mother-in-law's sneers, Linda's smug laughter, Kevin's cold eyes as he pushed her into the river. She saw her parents' faces pained when she turned her back on them, for love, their wealth, and wisdom dismissed in her youthful folly. The voice offered her eternal rest, or a chance to rewrite her fate. "I choose life," Emily whispered, her voice sharp as a blade. "I choose justice." The void pulsed, and a searing light enveloped her. The presence spoke again. "The heavens grant you this rebirth, but know this: your path will test your heart. Vengeance may consume you as it does your enemies." Emily nodded, undeterred. The light intensified, and her soul plunged through time, the years unraveling like threads in a tapestry. She felt her body reform young and strong, her mind sharp with memories of a life not yet lived. When the light faded, she opened her eyes to a familiar scene, the cramped, noisy yard of her old home 20 years ago. It was 2005, and Emily was 25 again, standing at the threshold of the life that had broken her. The air was thick with the stench of chickens and ducks held by aunts and cousins who chattered loudly, their voices a cacophony of gossip and laughter. Her mother-in-law's shrill command cut through the din. "Emily, what are you standing there for? Get to work." The words were identical to those from her past life, a script she had followed unthinkingly, slaughtering poultry and serving guests like servants. But now her heart raced with purpose. She wasn't the naive girl who had obeyed without question. She was a woman reborn, armed with the knowledge of betrayal and the pain of a life stolen. Emily's hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of her second chance. She thought of her parents who had begged her not to marry Kevin, warning her of his shallow ambitions. She had pushed them away, lying about being an orphan to silence their protests, all to protect a love that proved false. The memory of their hurt faces stung, but it also fueled her resolve. She would not repeat her mistakes. She would reclaim her life, her family, and her dignity. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Kevin, knowing he was already entangled with Linda, plotting the affair that would birth their son in secret. The celestial voice's warning echoed in her mind. Vengeance could consume her. Yet, Emily felt no hesitation. Kevin, Linda, and her mother-in-law had taken everything her youth dreams and trust. She would not forgive, nor would she forget. Her rebirth was a gift, a divine mandate to balance the scales. As she stepped forward, the clamor of the gathering faded, and her focus sharpened. This time she would play their game, but by her rules. She would unravel their lies, expose their deceit, and watch them fall. With a quiet breath, she whispered to herself, "Let karma begin." Emily stood frozen at the yard's edge, the summer air thick with the acrid stench of chickens and ducks clutched by chattering relatives. It was 2005, and the scene was a perfect echo of her past life, a chaotic family gathering at her and Kevin's modest home, a ramshackle house dwarfed by the city's gleaming skyline where her parents' shopping mall loomed in the distance. The clamor of voices, the clucking of poultry, and the oppressive heat pulled her back to a moment she had lived before when she was 25, naive and eager to please. Her mother-in-law's voice sliced through the noise like a whip. "Emily, what are you standing there like a statue for? Hurry up and kill those chickens. The guests are starving." The words were identical to those from her previous life, a command that had once sent her scurrying to obey. In that past life, Emily had been a shadow, her dreams of studying art buried under the weight of duty. She had slaughtered poultry she'd never touched before, boiled water, and slaved over steaming pots, all while Kevin and his mother treated her like a servant. She had believed it was her role as a wife, a sacrifice for the man she loved, the man she had defied her wealthy parents to marry. Her parents, who owned the city's largest mall, had warned her about Kevin's shallow charm, but she had pushed them away, claiming she was an orphan, to silence their protests. The memory of their disappointed faces stung, now a reminder of the life she had abandoned for a lie. But this time Emily was different. Her rebirth had sharpened her senses, and the celestial voice's warning vengeance could consume her echoed faintly in her mind. She clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms as she scanned the crowd. Aunts and cousins lounged under a sagging canopy, their laughter fueled by Kevin's effortless charisma. They adored him, the golden son who spun tales of ambition while shirking responsibility. Emily knew their loyalty was shallow, rooted in his charm and the promise of free meals, not in any absolute devotion. She could use that. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Kevin across the yard, his smile as false as she now knew his heart to be. Her mother-in-law, a wiry woman with a pinched face, bustled toward her, her apron stained with years of complaints. "Emily, move it! Please don't embarrass us in front of family," she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. In her past life, Emily would have bowed her head, grabbed the cleaver, and set to work, her hands trembling from inexperience. Now she met the older woman's glare with a steady gaze, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a quiet fury. She saw the truth in her mother-in-law's eyes. The woman had always known about Kevin's affair with Linda, had tolerated it to keep Emily chained to her bedside. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Emily took a slow breath, her mind racing. She could play the obedient wife again, biding her time, or she could strike now, disrupt the script that had trapped her for 20 years. The relative's chatter faded as she weighed her options. Kevin was watching her now, his brow furrowed, sensing something off. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes and stepped forward. "Of course, Mother," she said, her voice calm but laced with an edge she couldn't entirely hide. She turned toward the makeshift table where the poultry awaited, but her mind was elsewhere, plotting the first move in a game she was determined to win. This was no longer just a family gathering, it was a battlefield. Emily's heart ached with the weight of her past mistakes, but also burned with purpose. She would not be a fool again. She would unravel Kevin's lies, expose his mother's complicity, and make them face the consequences of their deceit. As she moved through the crowd, her eyes caught the distant glint of the mall's glass towers, a silent reminder of the power she had forsaken. She would reclaim it, all her family dignity and life. The game had begun, and Emily was ready to play. The yard buzzed with the clamor of relatives, their voices a grating hum under the sweltering sun of 2005. Emily stood near the makeshift table, her hands hovering over a basket of squawking chickens, her mother-in-law's command to slaughter them still ringing in her ears. The familiar scene, a chaotic family gathering at her and Kevin's rundown home, felt like a stage set for her past life's humiliation. But Emily, reborn with the bitter wisdom of 20 years betrayed, was no longer the obedient girl who had slaved for approval. Her heart thudded with rage and resolve, her mind sharp with memories of Kevin's deceit and her mother-in-law's cruelty. She scanned the crowd, noting the aunts and cousins who fawned over Kevin, their loyalty bought with his charming lies and promises of free feasts. They were a fickle audience, easily swayed, and Emily intended to turn them. A ripple of murmurs broke her focus. Heads turned toward the gate, where a woman strode in her flamboyant red dress, clashing with the yard's drab dust. Linda. Her dark hair cascaded in calculated waves, her lips curled in a smug smile that Emily now recognized as a mask for ambition. At her side toddled a 3-year-old boy, his features a mirror of Kevin's, a secret Emily had uncovered only after her death in her past life. The sight pierced her heart, a fresh wound atop old scars. She remembered Kevin's honeyed words, how he'd claimed he didn't want children, to spare her the burden of motherhood, a lie that had moved her to tears. How foolish she had been believing his devotion while he built a family with Linda behind her back. Linda's arrival drew gasps and whispers from the relatives who admired her bold confidence, mistaking it for sophistication. Emily's mother-in-law hurried forward, her pinched face splitting into a rare smile. "Linda, you're here," she cooed, her voice dripping with warmth she never spared for Emily. "If you were my daughter-in-law, I'd be the happiest woman alive." "And this little cutie?" She bent to pinch the boy's cheek, ignoring Emily entirely. The words were a dagger, confirming what Emily's reborn soul had pieced together. Her mother-in-law had known about Kevin's affair all along. She had stayed silent, not out of loyalty to her son, but to keep Emily tethered, as her caretaker, a servant, to nurse her through her eventual paralysis. Emily's chest tightened, her breath shallow, as memories flooded back 20 years of scrubbing, feeding, and enduring insults, all while Linda and Kevin mocked her sacrifice. She thought of her parents, whose wealth and love she had forsaken for Kevin, their warnings about his shallow heart dismissed in her youthful arrogance. The distant glint of their mall's towers, visible beyond the yard's sagging fence, was a quiet reminder of the life she could reclaim. But the pain of Linda's presence, flaunting the child Emily had been denied, threatened to unravel her composure. Linda's eyes met Emily's, her smile sharpening into a challenge. Oh, Emily, still standing there like a post. She teased, her voice loud enough for the relatives to hear. A few chuckled their loyalty to Kevin, making them quick to dismiss Emily. Linda's ambition was clear. She craved the status of being Kevin's chosen, the glamorous partner who outshone the drab wife. She had always seen Emily as an obstacle, a fool to be manipulated, while she secured her place in Kevin's life. Emily's fingers twitched, itching to wipe the smugness from Linda's face, but she forced herself to stay calm. Rage would not serve her yet. Instead, Emily tilted her head, her expression blank, but her eyes cold. "Just waiting for the real star to arrive, Linda," she said, her voice steady but laced with mockery. The relatives' laughter faltered, sensing a shift. Kevin, lounging nearby, frowned, his charm disrupted by Emily's unexpected bite. Her mother-in-law's smile tightened, her eyes darting between them. Emily's heart raced, but she held her ground. This was the moment to rewrite the script. Linda and her mother-in-law thought they could play her for a fool again, but Emily was no longer their pawn. She would expose their lies, turn the relatives' shallow allegiance, and make them see the truth. The game was on, and Emily was ready to strike. The yard pulsed with the restless energy of the 2005 family, gathering the air heavy with the stench of poultry and the chatter of relatives. Emily stood by the rickety table, her hands no longer trembling over the basket of squawking chickens. Her mother-in-law's shrill command to slaughter them still hung in the air, echoed by Linda's taunting smirk and the relatives' expectant gazes. In her past life, Emily had bowed to these demands, her youth spent slaving for a family that mocked her devotion. She had forsaken her parents' wealth, and their mall was a distant symbol of the life she abandoned for Kevin's false love. But now reborn, with the scars of betrayal, Emily felt a fire ignite. She would not be their servant again. Linda's red dress flashed in the sunlight as she tossed her hair, her voice dripping with condescension, and Emily daydreamed. "The guests are waiting," she said, her words a calculated jab to keep Emily in her place. Linda's ambition burned clear. She craved the spotlight, the role of Kevin's perfect partner, and saw Emily as a dull obstacle to her glamorous facade. The relatives, swayed by Kevin's charm and Linda's boldness, chuckled their loyalty, as fleeting as the free meal they expected. Emily's mother-in-law nodded approvingly at Linda, her eyes sliding over Emily with disdain as if she were invisible. Emily's heart ached, not from their scorn, but from the memory of her past self, naïve, eager to please, blind to the affair that had already taken root. She thinks of her parents, their warnings about Kevin ignored and their love rejected when she claims to be an orphan. The distant silhouette of their mall, barely visible beyond the yard's sagging fence, whispered of a power she could reclaim. The celestial voice's warning vengeance could consume her flickered in her mind, but she pushed it aside. This was her moment to rewrite the script. With a slow, deliberate smile, Emily picked up the basket of chickens and ducks, their feathers ruffling under her grip. She turned to Linda, her voice calm, but sharp as a blade. "You're right, Linda. You're so capable, so perfect for this family. Why don't you show us how it's done?" Before Linda could protest, Emily thrust the basket into her arms, the birds squawking in protest. The relatives' laughter died, their eyes widening at the unexpected shift. Linda's face froze, her smugness faltering. I'm not part of the household," she stammered, her ambition clashing with her reluctance to dirty her hands. Kevin, lounging nearby, straightened his brow, furrowing. "Emily, please stop it. Linda's a guest." He snapped, his tone betraying his need to protect his mistress and maintain his image as the family's golden son. But Emily met his glare with a cool stare. "A guest. She's practically family, Kevin. You said so yourself." Her words hung heavy, a veiled jab at their secret affair. The relatives exchanged glances, sensing tension they couldn't yet name. Emily's mother-in-law scowled, her plan to keep Emily subservient unraveling. Without waiting for a response, Emily shoved Kevin toward the kitchen, her strength surprising him. She said, "Help Linda, since you're so close," slamming the door behind them. The thud echoed in the yard, silencing the crowd. Linda, clutching the basket, looked to Kevin for rescue, but his frustration was evident. He couldn't afford to lose face in front of his family. Emily turned to the relatives, her smile now warm and inviting. She said, "Let's chat while they work," guiding them to the canopy. She spun stories, her wit sharp and engaging, winning their attention. The aunts who had once dismissed her leaned in, charmed by her confidence. Linda's incompetence was evident inside the kitchen, pots clattered and her complaints drifted through the cracked window. Kevin's attempts to help were met with her sharp retorts, their dynamic exposed as strained. The relatives, no longer distracted by Kevin's charisma, whispered among themselves, their loyalty wavering. Emily's heart raced with triumph, but beneath it a pang of sorrow lingered for the girl she had been, for the family she had lost. This was only the beginning. She would turn their game against them, and the relatives' fickle hearts would be her first weapon. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the chaotic yard where the family gathering had unraveled. Emily sat under the canopy, her laughter mingling with the relatives, as she spun tales that held their attention, a stark contrast to the servile role she had played in her past life. Inside the kitchen, Linda's frustrated curses and the clatter of pots betrayed her struggle with the poultry Emily had thrust upon her. Kevin's attempts to assist were met with sharp rebukes, their strained dynamic exposed to the relatives' prying ears. The aunts and cousins, once loyal to Kevin's charm, now leaned toward Emily, their shallow allegiance shifting with her newfound confidence. The distant silhouette of her parents' mall, its glass towers catching the fading light, reminded her of the power she could reclaim, a life she had forsaken for a man who betrayed her. As twilight settled, a piercing scream shattered the chatter. Emily's mother-in-law staggered from the house, clutching her chest, her face contorted in pain. She collapsed onto the dirt, her body seizing as relatives rushed to her side. "Call a doctor!" an aunt shouted while others stood frozen, their earlier joviality replaced by panic. Emily's heart skipped, not from fear, but from the eerie familiarity of the moment. In her past life, this stroke had chained her to 20 years of caregiving, a duty she had accepted, while Kevin distanced himself, his affair with Linda flourishing in secret. Now she watched her expression calm, but her mind racing with the weight of her rebirth. Kevin pushed through the crowd, his face pale but his eyes calculating. He knelt beside his mother, playing the role of the dutiful son, though Emily knew his concern was more for appearances than love. Kevin's motivation was clear. He craved the admiration of his family, the image of a man who had everything under control. "She'll be fine," he roared, as if to convince himself, but his voice wavered. The relatives who had fawned over him hours earlier now hesitated, their loyalty tested by the crisis. They feared being roped into financial or caregiving burdens, their earlier warmth cooling as they whispered. An ambulance arrived, its siren cutting through the night. As paramedics lifted her mother-in-law onto a stretcher, Kevin's eyes found Emily's, a mix of desperation and expectation. "Emily, come with us. She needs you," he said, his tone commanding, yet edged with panic. In her past life, she would have obeyed her heart, soft with duty, her dreams of art and family buried under Kevin's demands. She thought of her parents, whose warnings she had ignored, their love rejected when she lied about being an orphan to marry him. The memory of their hurt and the distant glow of their mall fueled her resolve. This time she would not bend. Emily stepped forward, her voice cold and steady. "You wanted Linda to be part of this family, Kevin. Let her handle it." The words landed like a slap, and the relatives gasped, their whispers growing louder. Hovering at the crowd's edge, Linda paled, her ambition for status clashing with the reality of responsibility. Kevin's jaw tightened, his pride wounded, but he couldn't argue without exposing his affair. "She's not family," he hissed, but Emily cut him off. "She's close enough, isn't she? You and your mother seem to think so." The veiled accusation hung in the air, and the relatives' eyes darted between them, sensing a truth they couldn't yet name. Without another word, Emily turned and walked away, her steps deliberate as she left the chaos behind. The relatives' murmurs followed her, their loyalty to Kevin fraying as they questioned his authority. Emily's heart pounded, not with guilt but with triumph. The celestial voice's warning vengeance could consume her echoed faintly, but she dismissed it. She had spent 20 years serving a family that betrayed her, sacrificing her youth and her parents' love. Now she would let Kevin and Linda face the consequences of their choices. As she glanced back at the ambulance's red lights fading into the night, she knew this was only the beginning. The scales were tipping, and she would ensure they fell in her favor. Emily walked away from the chaotic yard, the wail of the ambulance fading into the night as her mother-in-law was whisked away, paralyzed by a stroke. The relatives' shocked whispers and Kevin's desperate glare lingered in her mind, but her steps were steady, her heart alight with a newfound freedom. In her past life, she had rushed to her mother-in-law's side, chaining herself to 20 years of caregiving, while Kevin and Linda betrayed her with a secret family. In 2005, reborn at 25 with the bitter wisdom of her future, Emily refused to repeat that sacrifice. The celestial voice's warning vengeance could consume her echoed faintly, but the pulse of her resolve drowned it out. She would not be their pawn again. She found herself in a quiet cafe on the edge of town, its warm lights contrasting with the dusty yard she had left behind. The distant glow of her parents' shopping mall, its glass towers piercing the night sky, drew her gaze. That mall, a symbol of the wealth and love she had rejected, was a wound that ached anew. At 18, Emily had fallen for Kevin's charm, a delivery boy with dreams too big for his means. Her parents, who owned the city's largest retail empire, had seen through him, warning her of his shallow heart. But Emily, stubborn and in love, had lied, claiming she was an orphan to silence their protests. She had cut them off, trading their support for a marriage that ended in betrayal, drowned in a river by the man she had given everything for. Sitting at a corner table, a cup of untouched coffee cooling before her, Emily let the weight of her past settle. She remembered her dreams of studying art and painting canvases that captured the world's beauty dreams, buried under the drudgery of Kevin's household. She saw her parents' faces etched with pain when she turned her back on them, their voices pleading for her to stay. The regret was a knife twisting deeper, as she realized how her choices had led to a life of servitude and loss. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were not for Kevin or his mother. They were for the girl she had been who believed love could conquer all, and for the family she had pushed away. Emily pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed a message to her mother. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" Her thumb hovered over the send button, fear and hope warring within her. She had never reached out in her past life, too ashamed to admit her mistakes. Now reborn, she refused to let pride keep her from healing. She pressed send, her heart pounding as she waited. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply. "Come home." 3 simple words, yet they cracked something open inside her, a flood of relief and longing. Her parents' love, which she had once spurned, was still there waiting. As she sipped her coffee, Emily reflected on the path ahead. Her rebirth was a chance for revenge and an opportunity to rebuild herself. She imagined returning to her family's business, learning its workings, perhaps even reviving her passion for art. The mall, a beacon in the distance, was more than wealth, a legacy she could claim, a way to honor her parents and herself. But first, she had to dismantle the lies that had trapped her. Kevin and Linda thought they could continue their charade with the relatives' shallow loyalty propping them up. They were wrong. Emily's charm had already begun to sway the aunts and cousins, planting seeds of doubt about Kevin's golden image. She stood leaving the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. The relatives who had fawned over Kevin's charm were fickle, drawn to whoever shone brightest. Emily would use that, turning their allegiance to her side. Kevin's desperation to maintain his facade and Linda's ambition to be his perfect partner would be their undoing. The mall's lights flickered like a promise as she entered the cool night air. Emily was no longer the naive girl who had sacrificed everything. She was a woman reborn, ready to reclaim her roots and rewrite her story. The game was far from over, and she was just getting started. The hospital corridor reeked of antiseptic, its fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on the linoleum floor. Emily stood outside her mother-in-law's room, and the chaos of the 2005 family gathering was now a distant memory. Days had passed since the older woman's stroke, and the relatives' initial concern had faded into avoidance, their shallow loyalty to Kevin's charm dissolving as they dodged the burden of care. Emily had walked away from that yard, her refusal to serve marking the end of her past life's servitude. Her heart still carried the weight of her choices, rejecting her parents' wealth, abandoning her art dreams for Kevin's lies, but her message to her mother and the reply of "come home" had ignited a spark of hope. Now she was here not to help, but to deliver a truth that would shatter Kevin's facade. Inside the room, her mother-in-law lay frail in a hospital bed, her once sharp tongue silenced by paralysis. Kevin stood by her side, his face a mask of concern, but Emily knew his motives. He played the dutiful son to maintain the relatives' admiration, to keep his image untarnished. Linda hovered nearby, her red dress replaced by a prim blouse, her eyes darting nervously. She craved the status of being Kevin's chosen, the glamorous partner who could secure a comfortable life, but the reality of caregiving loomed like a cage. The relatives scattered around the room whispered among themselves, their earlier loyalty to Kevin fraying as they sensed his desperation. They had always been fickle, drawn to whoever shone brightest, and Emily was ready to shift the spotlight. Kevin's eyes locked onto her as she entered, his voice sharp. "Emily, where the hell have you been? Mom needs you. Get over here and help." In her past life, she would have obeyed her heart, soft with duty, sacrificing 20 years to nurse a woman who despised her. Now her gaze was cold, her resolve steeled by the memory of her drowning orchestrated by Kevin and Linda. She thought of her parents, their mall, a distant beacon of the life she could reclaim, and the art she had abandoned for a man who betrayed her. The celestial voices warning vengeance could consume her flickered, but she pushed it aside. This was justice, not consumption. "I'm not here to clean up your mess, Kevin," Emily said, her voice steady but cutting. She pulled a folded document from her bag, its edges crisp from the lab. "I'm here to show everyone who you are." The relatives fell silent, their eyes wide. Kevin's face paled, sensing a trap, while Linda's composure cracked, her ambition clashing with fear. Emily held up the paternity test, her voice rising. "This proves your son Linda's boy is yours, Kevin. 3 years old, born while you swore you loved me." Gasps echoed through the ward, the relatives' whispers turning to shock. An aunt clutched her purse, her loyalty to Kevin crumbling as the truth hit. Linda stammered, her face flushed. "That's nonsense, you're lying." but her voice betrayed her. She had always known the child was Kevin's, a secret she wielded to bind him to her, to secure her place in his life. Kevin lunged for the document, but Emily stepped back, holding it high. "You told me you didn't want kids to spare me, Kevin. You lied while building a family with her." Her words were a blade slicing through his facade. The relatives, once charmed by his stories, now stared with disgust, their fickle hearts turning. An uncle muttered, "How could he do this?" And others nodded, their allegiance shifting. Kevin's eyes blazed, but he couldn't deny the evidence. "You're nothing, Emily," he spat, desperate to regain control. "Does this change anything?" Emily smiled, cold and unyielding. "It changes everything. Linda's your family now. Let her care for your mother." She turned to the relatives, her voice calm but commanding. "I'm done here. They're your family, not mine." She walked out, leaving silence in her wake. Linda's ambition had led her to this moment, trapped by the role she never wanted. Kevin's need for admiration had cost him his allies. Emily's heart raced with triumph, tempered by a pang of sorrow for the girl she had been. The mall's distant lights called her home, and she knew her revenge was only beginning. The hospital's sterile hum faded behind Emily as she stepped into the cool night air of 2005, her heart thrumming with the triumph of exposing Kevin and Linda's affair. The paternity test had shattered their facade, leaving the relatives' fickle loyalty in tatters. In her past life, Emily had shouldered the burden of caring for her paralyzed mother-in-law, sacrificing her youth while Kevin and Linda lived freely. Now reborn at 25, she had thrust that responsibility onto Linda, walking away from the hospital with her head high. The distant glow of her parents' shopping mall, a symbol of the life she had forsaken, beckoned her toward redemption. Yet beneath her resolve, a pang of sorrow lingered for the girl who had believed in Kevin's love and abandoned her art dreams and her family's embrace. Weeks passed, and whispers reached Emily through the town's gossip mill. Linda, now tasked with caring for Kevin's paralyzed mother, was failing spectacularly. Her ambition to be Kevin's glamorous partner, basking in status and ease, clashed with the gritty reality of caregiving. She had seen the role as a means to secure her place in Kevin's life, a stepping stone to a comfortable future, but the endless demands, feeding, bathing, changing diapers, were beneath her. The mother-in-law's cramped room, tucked in the back of their rundown home, reeked of neglect. Linda's care was perfunctory. A pot of cold rice porridge cooked once daily served for every meal, and adult diapers changed only when she could no longer ignore the stench. The relatives, once charmed by Kevin's charisma, now distanced themselves, their shallow allegiance broken by the scandal of his affair. They avoided the house, unwilling to be drawn into the mess, their whispers spreading tales of Linda's incompetence. While planning her return to her parents' world, Emily, staying with a friend, heard these stories with satisfaction and regret. She remembered her past life, scrubbing her mother-in-law's frail body, enduring insults, all for a family that betrayed her. The memory of her parents' hurt when she lied about being an orphan to marry Kevin stung deeply. Yet her rebirth had given her clarity. She would not let guilt pull her back into their chaos. Emily's phone rang one evening, and the screen flashed an unfamiliar number. She answered, and a trembling voice broke through. "Emily, please, you have to help me," her mother-in-law pleaded, her words slurred by weakness. "Linda's killing me. She barely feeds me, leaves me lying in filth. I was wrong to favor her. Please come back." The desperation was palpable, starkly contrasting with the woman who had once sneered at Emily's efforts. Emily paused, popping a cherry into her mouth, its tartness grounding her. The celestial voice's warning vengeance could consume her flickered, but she brushed it aside. "She said you wanted Linda as your daughter-in-law," her voice cold but steady. "You said she was perfect, that I was nothing. Live with your choice." A sharp screech cut through the line, Linda's voice shrill with rage. "Who are you mumbling to, you old hag?" A slap echoed, followed by a muffled cry, and the call dropped. Emily set the phone down, her heart a storm of emotions. Part of her ached for the frail woman trapped by her schemes, but another part burned with justice. Her mother-in-law had known about Kevin's affair and had used Emily's devotion to keep her tethered. Now Linda's neglect was the consequence of that betrayal. The relatives, hearing of the abuse, clucked their tongues but stayed away, their loyalty fully eroded by the family's disgrace. Emily leaned back, gazing at the city skyline where her parents' mall stood, its lights promising a new beginning. She was no longer the girl who had sacrificed everything for a man who had drowned her. Her plan was working. Linda's ambition had trapped her, and Kevin's facade was crumbling. But this was only a step. Emily would ensure their downfall was complete, using their flaws against them. She thought of her parents, the art she could still create, and the life she would rebuild. The scales of karma were tipping, and she was the hand guiding them. The polished floors of the city's largest shopping mall gleamed under the midday sun of 2005, its glass towers a monument to Emily's family legacy. Months had passed since she exposed Kevin and Linda's affair at the hospital, leaving Linda to flounder in the role of caretaker for Kevin's paralyzed mother. The relatives once swayed by Kevin's charm had abandoned him, their fickle loyalty eroded by the scandal. Emily, now 25 and reborn, with the wisdom of her betrayed past, had begun working with her parents' business, learning the ropes of their retail empire. Once a distant symbol of the life she had forsaken, the mall was now her domain, a stage for her rising power. Yet beneath her confidence, a quiet ache lingered for the years she had lost to Kevin's lies, the art she had abandoned, and the parents she had pushed away. Emily strode through the mall, her tailored suit contrasting with the drab aprons of her past life. She was no longer the naive girl who had slaved for Kevin's family, believing his promises of love. Her parents' forgiveness, sparked by her heartfelt message, had welcomed her back, and she was determined to honor their trust. As she inspected a high-end boutique, a familiar voice cut through the hum of shoppers. "Well, look who's playing store clerk," Linda sneered, clinging to Kevin's arm, her red dress as bold as her ambition. In his manager's uniform, Kevin smirked, his pride fueled by his belief that his job was earned through merit, not Emily's past influence. Linda's taunt was deliberate. She craved the status of being Kevin's chosen, a glamorous partner who outshone Emily's supposed failure. Kevin, desperate to maintain his image as a successful man, reveled in showing off Linda, unaware of the truth about his job. In her past life, Emily had secretly pulled strings to get him promoted from delivery boy to manager, hoping to ease his struggles. Now she saw his ignorance as an opportunity. "Store clerk," Emily replied, her voice calm but sharp. "Funny, considering I'm the daughter of the mall's owner." She pulled a black diamond VIP card from her pocket, its sleek surface glinting under the lights, an exclusive pass with unlimited credit known to every employee. Kevin's smirk faltered, his eyes widening as he snatched the card, examining it with growing panic. "No way," he muttered, his pride crumbling. Linda's laugh was forced, her ambition clashing with fear. "You, the owner's daughter! Stop lying to win him back!" she scoffed, but her voice trembled. The relatives who might have once backed Kevin were absent, their loyalty long gone after the hospital scandal. Shoppers nearby paused, sensing drama, their whispers adding pressure. Emily's heart raced not with fear, but with the thrill of control. She thought of her past drowned by Kevin's betrayal and the art she could now pursue with her family's support. The celestial voice's warning vengeance could consume her flickered, but she dismissed it. This was justice. "You think I'm lying?" Emily said, her tone cold. She pulled out her phone and dialed HR, her voice clear. "Fire Kevin, no severance, no compensation. His affair is a liability to the company's image, effective immediately." Kevin's face drained of color as his phone buzzed with the termination notice. He reread it, disbelief turning to desperation. "You can't do this!" he shouted, lunging toward her, but Emily's bodyguards, ever present since her return to the family, stepped forward, their presence a silent threat. Linda clung tighter to Kevin, her ambition crumbling as she realized his power was gone. Kevin's eyes darted to the shopping bags at his feet, filled with clothes he'd bought to impress Linda, draining his savings. "You'll regret this, Emily," he yelled, but his voice cracked, his facade shattered. Shoppers whispered, and Emily met their gazes with calm authority. "You thought you earned this job, Kevin," she said softly. "I got you that position back when I thought you deserved it. Now you've lost everything." She turned away, leaving him to face the consequences. The mall's lights gleamed, a testament to her rising power, and she knew her revenge was far from over. The city's skyline shimmered under the twilight of 2005, and the towering glass of Emily's parents' mall was a beacon of her reclaimed power. Months had passed since she fired Kevin from his manager job, stripping him of his pride and leaving him and Linda to flounder in financial ruin. Linda's neglect of Kevin's paralyzed mother had turned their home into a prison of stench and misery, the relatives long gone, their shallow loyalty dissolved by the scandal Emily exposed. Now 25, reborn with the bitter wisdom of her betrayed past, Emily stood at the helm of her family's business, her heart a mix of triumph and lingering sorrow for the years she lost to Kevin's lies, for the art she had abandoned, for the parents she had pushed away. Her mother's words. Come home had begun to heal that wound, but her mission was not yet complete. Word reached Emily that Kevin's mother had died, her frail body withered to barely 50 pounds, a victim of Linda's neglect. The relatives, once quick to praise Kevin, offered only enough for a hasty cremation, unwilling to involve themselves further. Freed from caregiving, Linda fled to the city, her ambition driving her to chase wealthy suitors, leaving Kevin and their son behind. Kevin, broke and desperate, turned to slander, spreading lies about Emily online, painting her as a heartless heiress who abandoned her family. His motive was clear: he clung to the hope of regaining his status, deflecting blame to salvage his shattered ego. But Emily, now a force in her parents' empire, was untouchable. Her bodyguards and the mall's influence shielded her from his attacks, and the relatives, wholly alienated, ignored his pleas. One evening, as Emily left the mall, Kevin appeared, his face haggard, his clothes tattered, a far cry from the charming man she had once loved. He dropped to his knees, tears streaming, his voice broken. "Emily, I was wrong. Linda tricked me. That boy isn't mine. She swapped the hair for the paternity test. I'd never have left you if I'd known. Please give me another chance." His desperation was a ploy driven by his need to escape the consequences of his choices to latch onto Emily's newfound wealth. Linda, meanwhile, had been caught pursuing a married man, her reputation ruined when his wife publicly shamed her, leaving her bruised and begging to be a mistress. Her ambition had led her to debase herself, a shadow of the glamorous facade she once wore. Emily's heart wavered, not with pity, but with the memory of her past life drowned by Kevin's hands, betrayed by his lies. She thought of her parents, their forgiveness a lifeline, and the art she was beginning to rediscover, sketching in quiet moments. The celestial voices warning vengeance could consume her echoed, but she saw this not as vengeance but justice. She leaned down, her voice soft but venomous. "It's all because of Linda, isn't it, Kevin? She ruined your life, tricked you, destroyed everything. If it weren't for her, you'd be thriving, right?" Her words were a trap, feeding his desperation to blame someone else. Kevin's eyes lit with a manic glint, his voice feverish. "Yes, that damn Linda! She lied about the kid, used me, ruined our family!" He rose, muttering curses, his mind unraveling. Emily stepped back, her bodyguards nearby, as Kevin stormed off, consumed by rage. Hours later, word reached her. Kevin, in a frenzy, had confronted Linda, his accusations turning violent. He grabbed a kitchen knife, slashing her beyond recognition. As he fled, his mind shattered, he ran into a fuel tanker, his body crushed instantly. The police found no relatives willing to claim him, their loyalty long gone. Emily, unmoved, arranged for his ashes to be scattered in the village's sewage pit, a fitting end for a man who had lived as trash. Linda's death and Kevin's demise closed a chapter. Emily stood on the mall's rooftop, the city sprawling below her, heart steady. The relatives, once complicit, now whispered her name with respect, their fickle hearts won by her strength. She had avenged her past, but more importantly, she had reclaimed her future. The scales of karma had balanced, and she was free. The city skyline glowed under the dawn of 2005, the glass towers of Emily's parents' mall catching the first light like a beacon of hope. Months had passed since Kevin's violent end and Linda's demise, their lives unraveled by their deceit and Emily's calculated justice. Once swayed by Kevin's charm, the relatives had scattered their fickle loyalty, now replaced by whispers of respect for Emily's strength. At 25, reborn with the wisdom of a betrayed past, Emily stood on the mall's rooftop, her heart a tapestry of triumph and healing sorrow. The weight of her past life, 20 years of servitude drowned by Kevin's hands, had lifted, but the scars remained etched in memories of lost dreams and a family forsaken. Emily's journey was one of vengeance and rediscovery. She thought of her parents, whose love she had rejected for Kevin, lying about being an orphan to silence their warnings. Their forgiveness, sparked by her simple message, "Come home," had mended a rift she once thought permanent. Now she worked alongside them, learning the intricacies of their retail empire, her days filled with spreadsheets and strategy meetings. Yet in quiet moments, she returned to her first love, art. Her sketches, once abandoned for Kevin's demands, now filled notebooks with vibrant landscapes and portraits, each stroke reclaiming the life she had lost. The celestial voices warning vengeance could consume her had faded, replaced by a truth: her revenge had freed her, not defined her. The relatives who had once dismissed her as a servant now spoke her name with awe. Once loyal to Kevin's charisma, their shallow hearts turned when she exposed his affair and rose to power. An aunt had even called her voice hesitant to apologize for siding with Kevin, admitting his tales had blinded them. Emily forgave them not out of softness, but because their allegiance no longer mattered. She had built a new foundation rooted in her family's love and strength. The mall, once a distant symbol of what she had forsaken, was now her domain, a testament to her parents' trust and her capability. As she gazed over the city, Emily reflected on the path that led her here. Kevin's desperation to maintain his facade, Linda's ambition to claim a glamorous life, and her mother-in-law's complicity had been their undoing. Emily had merely held up a mirror, letting their flaws consume them. Kevin's ashes scattered in the village's sewage pit marked the end of his betrayal. Linda's death, a consequence of her scheming, closed a chapter of deceit. The mother-in-law's neglected end was a grim echo of the scorn she had heaped on Emily. Each had faced karma not by chance but through Emily's deliberate hand. Yet her victory was not just in their downfall. Emily enrolled in an art course, and her evenings are now spent in a studio painting canvases that capture the city's pulse. She dined with her parents, their laughter filling the gaps of lost years. Her mother, once hurt by Emily's rejection, now framed her sketches, pride in her eyes. Her father taught her the business, and his trust was a gift she cherished. Emily's heart, once heavy with regret, now felt light, her future open like the dawn before her. She had no desire for love, yet her trust in men was scarred, but she found joy in her independence, her art colors, and her family's warmth. Standing on the rooftop, Emily smiled at the city sprawling below. Good and evil find their due, she murmured, the lesson of her rebirth clear. Karma had arrived not as a fleeting wish, but as a force she had wielded. Her true rewards were her relatives' respect, her parents' love, and her rediscovered passion. She turned from the edge, her steps confident, ready to embrace a life no longer defined by betrayal, but by the beauty she would create.